specifically protesting for a good cause or any kind of activism. Just to get a couple things out of the way, I totally understand everybody's feelings. I myself have anxiety and I don't do great in crowds. Um, and I'm a pretty skeptical person. I'm not somebody who takes things at face value. Um, and also, I absolutely 100% agree that we can all take more time to focus on ourselves, our connection to Allah, the Quran, and people generally underestimate the impact that dua and, especially your akhlaq can have. Um, if you have a movement you care about or something like that, right? But this is just some information that I've collected over time. Um, I've put in I'm almost certain that your guys' Islamic knowledge eclipses mine, but I am very familiar with the history and mechanics of power and change in not just this country, but Western countries in general. I've tried to put in the effort to attend lectures, learn about the methods by which we can enact change, and how the ruling class works. I will never urge anybody to follow any one speaker or sheikh or any one book or anything, right? Not even me. I believe in keeping your information diverse and looking into things yourself until where you feel comfortable about what you feel. I will have sources and stuff at the end. And again, not an expert, right? So I wanted to get into a couple big things real quick. People have religious concerns against protests. There's three primary ones that I've seen. The first one that I've generally seen spread a lot is that protesting is the method of the kuffar. The next one is that it's a fitna. The next one is that it distracts you from prayer or the deen. Is protesting a method of the kuffar? As far as I can tell from consensus, it is just as much a method of the kuffar as driving your car is, or striking when it is written in your work contract to strike, or voting. We are not forbidden as Muslims from participating in politics or entering the workspace or being a part of the society. Some people do believe that firmly in the eyes of Sharia, democracy in all of its systems is considered an aspect of shirk. That's not my stance. I'm just saying that that stance exists. Protests and things like that are all just a means to some end, right? In our times, these are the main means of scaling our influence and effectiveness. Think of it like a stat buff in a game. There is nothing inherently problematic with these systems. But if we participate in these, or when we do, we have to remember that, the tawfiq or the ability to create change within them comes solely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So as Muslims, we should always be vigilant with our connection, of our connection with Allah, right? Just as you can put 800 different locks on your car, but if it's gonna get stolen, it's gonna get stolen, right? As long as you, and I think this is a key point, the major body of organized participants understand what this mechanism is that you're participating in, and you don't allow it to separate you from your religious obligations, just as a lock should not separate you from the belief that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is protecting you. There is no consensus among scholars that protesting specifically should be seen as a method of the kuffar. On the subject of it being a fitna, on this point specifically, I agree, depending on how or who is organizing the protest. The easiest example, there was one, I think, on Thursday or Wednesday, I forget what day it was, where it was indoors here in Dearborn. And there was a bunch of dancing and singing and all these things. I am not going to judge anybody. I'm not the person to do that, right? I'm not my place, not my time. But for me personally, that's not acceptable for me to participate in, right? However, the one yesterday, Saturday, I went out of my way to message the organizers and talk to them, and they were like, absolutely, there's going to be no music or dancing. They would make room and time for prayer, etc. Um, the vibe would absolutely not be celebratory in any capacity, right? As for the mixing of men and women, now I understand people's perspective on it, right? I'm not going to ever argue that this is a positive thing or that we should support it, but I do have counters. We have all attended weddings with dancing, with music, with mixed gathering, right? We all do not live in an Islamic state. We all went to school and college and all that stuff. I'm not saying that one sin makes another sin okay or acceptable, but I feel like these kinds of objections only come up when people feel really uncomfortable doing something, which is totally okay. You can say, I am uncomfortable doing something. That's fine. But again, if you go to one of these things as a Muslim, you're not voiceless, especially at a protest where you are protesting for a just cause or a rally. You're supposed to reach out and be aware of and counter the bystander effect. If you see somebody doing something wrong, or if you see somebody doing something that is haram and you know that they are a Muslim, you can gently correct them. This is something you should do so that your protest does not transgress limits. The organization of any event, this goes for anything, is what will determine if it is a fitna. Distraction from the deen continued. I completely agree. Again, we should focus on making dua. We should donate as much as we can. We should learn the Quran and ponder upon it, and the Sunnah and the Hadith. However, rallies do not inherently mean you stop donating or praying or making dua, right? If you take 3 hours out of your day max to go attend something, that doesn't mean that it should take up or remove your salah, or take away from your need to make dua or donate or etc. In fact, these places, from what I have seen, are places where people who are previously not as, I don't want to say practicing, but people who aren't as much involved in the deen can be reached out to, or become emboldened to go further down the righteous path. Your actions should not and do not have to inherently conflict with your religious obligations, whatever that is, right? And when Allah gives you an opportunity to, and I'm not saying that you have to, again, do what you are comfortable with. But if Allah gives you an opportunity, when we pray for wealth, we don't expect to win the lottery, right? We say Alhamdulillah when we get a really good job or business opportunity or some opportunity to apply ourselves. The next part that I've seen that people really have with this is ideological concerns. The first one that I've seen that's really upsetting is that protesting is appealing to or only pleading for aid from the kuffar. Next is that it's just waffling and that it doesn't work, it doesn't do anything. The third one is that it's wrong, it's illegal to inconvenience people and stuff like that, and we should focus on doing dawah. The first one, we are never seeking to plead with the kuffar, ever. If you went to one of them, especially the one yesterday, but if you go to any of these events, it is absolutely clear we are not seeking to plead with the kuffar. We are not there asking for their mercy or their help. We are demonstrating a will to take action and the ability to organize. This is something that I've gone to quite a few conferences of, let's say, leadership conferences of people who are influential in certain fields. Cybersecurity is one of them, and if you know about cybersecurity, you'll know how involved Israel is with that. Those with the keys to power fear that a lot, and almost exclusively that. I'm also not somebody who's nonviolent. Militias are not born in a day, right? There is a room for violence, and there is, I'm not going to get into all that stuff right now, but historically, rallying has demonstrated to be a critical step towards resistance, regardless of where, regardless of what kind. And if you don't want to hear it from our side, the powerful people pay specifically for this sentiment. And I know this because I've done research on, for example, social media algorithms. They pay to keep people disheartened and inactive. Trillions of dollars, right? One thing you should also take note of is that a lot of sheikhs get paid money by governments like Egypt and Saudi Arabia to say stuff that promotes the regime and is very anti-collective action. Egypt also receives the third most US military aid in the world right now, right after Afghanistan. And you all can kind of guess who number one is. And then the idea of do protests work? Yes, statistically, protests work in both making policymakers change their choices and also gathering up and collecting power to take further action. And you have to remember, we as Muslims were supposed to care about what's correct, what's right, what our deen says. These people pretend to have a deen. Like evangelicals pretend to be Christian. They only care about power. That's all they've ever demonstrated to care about. When these people realize that there is a group of scary brown people behind their walls that have critically not assimilated and are not dissuaded from taking action, they notice. And I can get into sentiment delta later if anybody's interested. Illegality, shortly, no, they don't have to be illegal. They can be sanctioned and fully approved and fully legal. Another thing is that I've had somebody reach out to me recently who had absolutely zero knowledge about these issues before. And by the end of it, he was like, I should read the Quran one day. So not just because of our deen, but because he also saw that our deen asks us to take action and not cower. People respect action. When you have the power and the numbers to lash out, but you choose not to, people admire that. Another thing I wanted to mention is that it's not a good idea to exclude personal outreach from a cause. There's various different examples of this I'm going to skip over. But one of the things that we have to believe in, it is part of taqdeer, is that that certain things don't mean that certain results are guaranteed. Change is a multi-pronged attack. You have to participate in multiple avenues of change if you actually genuinely care about change. It's the metaphorical tying of the camel. Um, let's skip over all this stuff, especially us here in the West. We are paying our governments, each and every one of us, to fund every bomb that lands on the soil that kills our people. I don't care where it is, Afghanistan, Palestine, it doesn't matter. We are the ones paying for that stuff. Taking organized and collective actions to make our politicians and leaders realize we are not assimilated and we are angry is something that we and only us, because they don't care about the brown people over there, they don't see them as humans, right? Only us, we can make that change and do that action. There's no one person to guillotine. You have to throw a wrench into the systems of power. We also don't have to give into emotional bouts of violence. You can't just go do some violence, right? You also can't sit idle and watch our humanitarian donations get blown up. You have to collect power, raise awareness in a careful, calculated way that only we can do. We have the luxury to do this. And I want you guys to remember, they fear this. This is precisely what they fear. That stuff on the map right there, that is what they fear. Why do you think they permanently want Muslims arguing amongst each other and fighting each other? And I've got some sources. So yeah, I just want to make that real quick. I can send this to you if you guys are interested. There's plenty of different readings that I can share. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure I shared that.
Barakallah feek, ya Sadiqi. That was really nice.